Well, hey everybody, Wes McDonald here, and my good friend Kenneth Edmonds. How are you, Ken?
I am fine. It's a nice day. It's gonna be a little bit hot here, but other than that, it's pretty good. And for those of you in the audience, we'll go ahead and start you off by tell us where you're watching from. How are things with you today, West?
Well, no complaints. As you know, Ken, our long weekend here in Canada, is a week before yours. So I'm literally coming off pretty much a 4-day weekend. We were talking little bit about that before the show got started. So got out and did some kayak fishing, and also did some work on a trailer for anyone out there. If anyone gives you an old trailer like your dad or anything else, don't recommend it. But that's what I spent my weekend doing. And also gave myself a little bit of a haircut. I don't know if you noticed, Ken, I'm a little more trim. The NPS Wolverine is a little less bushy on top than he was before. And thanks to you, actually, we had this conversation before because for those out there in broadcast land, we're still closed. I can't go to a barber, and my wife won't cut my hair, so I had to do it myself. And I was talking to you, and I think you cut your own hair sometimes too, right?
Yep. Actually, I start it and my wife finishes it.
Yeah.
She does the pieces I can't see. She doesn't mind.
All right.
I try really hard for a few days before that to be really nice.
Yeah, it's good advice. But so if anyone has any comments on my hair, please feel free to comment. And of course, if you have any questions throughout today, we're going to be talking about customers and devices to avoid under a flat rate program. And Ken, this is one conversation we have all the time when we're dealing with dealers and providers for managed print, is talking about what kinds of people to avoid, right? This is always the biggest fear, is who should I not be selling to? So I'm really excited to be able to move through this one today. And obviously, if anyone has any questions as we're moving through today, leave us your comments and your questions in the box, and we'll be sure to put you up on the screen today because it is live and interactive. Yeah, so Ken, your long weekend is coming up, and I guess you said you're going to be doing some work as well. You're quite a gardener. That's another thing that we share in common, is planting things that grow, but you take it to a whole other level. So for the watching, Ken is actually a farmer. On top of
my garden's around 3,000 square feet, so it keeps me busy.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
The man never sleeps. Hey, one of the things I want to talk about is that as we're going through this, some people may or may not be aware of, we did a 10-day challenge for the live stream. And I couldn't believe the attendance that we got from that globally, the number of people that registered for it and continue to register for it. I'm actually going to put a link in the comments right now for everybody that wants to register. And maybe you can talk a little bit about that, Ken.
Well, what that link will do is give you lifetime access to all of the recordings that we did of the live event. And normally it's a $299 value. It is free for those that are in attendance today because we want you to be able to get an idea of what this is about. And that live stream was not 10 days of commercials. That was 10 days of us sharing information, design, and just like this show is designed to help dealers that are interested in moving forward with flat rate billing programs to be able to do so successfully.
Yes. And I would also add that we've actually worked it out with one of our affiliate members, the MPSA, that if you are an MPSA member, you actually get access to the 10-day challenge for free. So you can reach out to me as the president or anyone else that you know with the MPSA. And don't forget, elections are coming up. So if you want to actually help out and join the cause, we would love to have you, on board. So again, free if you use that link that Ken shared out and the coupon code, as well as for MPSA members. And that does kind of, bring me to the next thing, right? Is that we couldn't have done any of that, even these live streams they're doing right now, if it wasn't for our partners. And some of the affiliates that you see listed up here on the screen, very progressive, very forward thinking, very much looking towards the future. And this reminds me of a time very much like when we started in the early days of managed print, Ken, and you'll remember that as well, right? Yeah. That, it didn't just happen overnight, that the movement was a progressive one, that there were dealers that started doing it initially, not that many. And there were partners that kind of stepped up to the plate to be able to facilitate that new ecosystem, right? And make no mistake, when we're talking about flat rate, for customers. It is not just a different way to bill customers. And you'll see that in the 10-day challenge. I still can't believe that, everything in there was provided for free. And thanks to the sponsors you see on the screen, that's why, because it's extremely valuable information, right?
In addition to sponsoring it, they all have tools that will help dealers that are interested in progressing in flat rate. They have the tools and the skill set to facilitate your journey.
Yes, it's true. And that's one of the things, as I mentioned, that flat rate is not just a billing mechanism, that there are tool sets in place to make it easier for you, right? So if you're going to be doing an assessment, then obviously Cartos is a great group to look at for their assessment platform. Predictive Insight for new options for DCAs that are self-healing. The 20 for looking at diversified services, Great America for financing flat rate deals. Tiger Paw for an ecosystem that will allow you both to do managed print and managed IT services. Clover Imaging, who's always had a great wholesale program for managed print providers to make sure you can service devices across the country. Nexera BI for what they do with all of their platform and their educational stuff that they do with their customers as well, to be able to understand which devices will make you the most money. Melissa Whitaker, you got to learn how to do this new sales process for flat rate. She's a great resource to reach out to, her and her team. And Pulsar 360 as well, right? So I encourage everyone to start asking their partners, how can you support flat rate? And if they don't have an answer, then continue to look for people to do, right?
Absolutely.
All right. So I don't want to make it a commercial, but I think we'll move on now to, first of all, talking about customers to avoid. And this is interesting. Like in managed print, we had defined the sweet spot for the kinds of customers that we were going to be selling to. And Ken, I think the good news is that doesn't change too much. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we, kind of move through this, right? You'll notice my lovely picture of a gramophone there. And the reason the gramophone is there is because it's something we all know of and not too many of us use anymore, right? And I love the expression Luddites, people that hold on to and embrace kind of the old ways of doing things, right? And certainly all of the information that we have here on the screen, which we'll talk through, is an indication of those kinds of customers, right? So flat rate is not for everybody, especially in the early days of the offerings, right? So the first point we have there are data hoarders. And this is one of those situations that we get into in a traditional NPS deal as well, where we're trying to get information to be able to do a better job to service our customers and our potential customers. And I don't know if anyone is still going through it. I mean, we are in Canada. The border hasn't opened up yet in the US. This thing called a pandemic, right? So the numbers that we had from, last year are not going to be enough to be able to build out sort of the information that we need. We need to look at what their more traditional behaviors looked like before that and what they look like now. Because Ken, I know in the US that it's almost back to business as usual, right? That things have really moved on. So, but we've got to get that data. And from a sales perspective, that's one of the things that you have to share with people that are prospects is that we need this information because remember, we're not charging per page. So if we're wrong about sort of your usage and everything else and our cost per page, that's okay because I'm just going to keep billing you more. It's not good for you and it's not good for me, but at least I'm covered, right? Under a flat rate program, everything is a cost. And I try and hammer that one home all the time, like the piece of equipment you're putting in there, the number of color pages that they're doing, the number of black and white pages, everything is a cost. You've got one price that you're going to be charging that customer, right? So invoices are really important. So those could be managed print invoices. And for some customers, believe it or not, there's still a lot of people out there that aren't even doing managed print today. What is it, Ken? I think the numbers are about 30 or 35% of pages out there actually under management. So there's a lot more out there that aren't. So you could also get toner cartridge invoices if they're still traditionally kind of procuring the old-fashioned way, right? Yeah. Meter reads we still got to get, and you're not going to be using them for billing, but you are going to be using them for tracking. So we need to make sure that we can get a historical look at what they were printing over time. The good news is if they are an MPS customer that signed up with a competitor, they'll have those. They'll have a lot of those. And it really gives you a strong opportunity to show them the benefits of a flat rate program and using those efficiencies to be able to save them money and make them more effective. because believe me, the person who has that contract today is not going to be doing that, right? So,
right. Yeah.
yeah, go ahead, Ken.
I was just going to say, and if they don't have records of this, the one thing you can do to get a sense of where they are historically, find out when a device is installed, look at the total count, and then you
Sure.
can figure out what they've done since date of installation and get a ballpark figure. Is it going to be perfect? No. But in this whole arena, we're not looking for perfect. We're just looking for a ballpark so we can have something to base our quotes and our information on, our estimates.
Yeah, that's right. And that's a really good ad that, those devices, as long as we know when they were purchased and we get those life counts and we can figure that out, you might have to roll up your sleeves a little bit more to get that data. But again, I don't think we should be doing any of these deals unless we're doing an assessment in the first place, right? One of the, the things that I was speaking with a friend of mine about just last week was actually getting a flat rate deal from a competitor based on sort of undercutting their price. And again, it just illustrates why we do not do flat rate just as a price-based game. Because Ken, like, what else have we been doing that with for the last 20 years?
Cost per copy. And
Right.
I don't know any dealer that's benefited from the direction the price has gone. The whole premise and the whole value of flat rate billing is to obscure what the cost per copy is and make it preferably impossible for your competition to know how you structured the deal. Because once that happens, you don't have to be the cheapest anymore. And I don't know about you, if I was a dealer today and involved in this race toward double O nothing, I would be looking for a way to change the game.
So I'm going to look directly into the camera now, because for everyone watching, the flat rate deals are much higher margin than you're making on a cost per page deal. But because of using the efficiencies of rules-based platforms where you can actually convert color to black and white and help them to do far less waste printing with secure release, the customer still spends less. And I need everyone to remember that yes, your margins are going to be better, which means your total profitability in the deal is going to be better. And I want to remind people of that again. Total deal profitability is actually higher, not just percentage, and the customer spends less, right? That can only happen if you get the right data.
Yeah.
The second piece that I would say for customers to avoid is if they're software adverse, and I want to take a second and talk to the rules-based one, but certainly if they're not willing to put in some kind of meter reading application, such as what is provided by Predictive Insights, then that's red flag number one. We live in an age when data helps us make better decisions, and that's a bare minimum. The second piece that I want to talk to is the rules-based software. And Ken, this has evolved quite a bit, right? That when you think of rules-based software in the past, and still today, there are a lot of providers that still do it this way today, that there was a lot of heavy lifting with the install. And I worked with a company that provided those services. And I remember going through that implementation phase. Sometimes it could be tough, right? Because the customer has to have their own server. Then they have to make sure that they have the right pieces of software like C+ or other things in place to be able to interact with the user-based software on the platform. And then they would have to do a network-wide push of a small file in each of the desktops to be able to talk to that server. So I get it, but those days don't exist anymore. If you look at a lot of the providers of these rules-based platforms, they have all launched into cloud-based services with a much lighter footprint. So we're getting to the point now where as long as they're willing to look at more modern ways of doing it, that there shouldn't be an argument with that rules-based software as well. Also, if they really want to save money and really effectively kind of manage their print, then that is the future. And I can tell you, Ken, any deal that I ever worked on where we installed or implemented rules-based software, we won those deals, because once the customer saw what the savings were going to be based on how they printed and what they were printing versus just the cost of the equipment and the pages, it was a no-brainer. You had to do an assessment. You had to get people comfortable to that stage, but absolutely incredible, right? So, certainly make sure that any customer that you talk to, the progressive ones, that they're not going to be adverse to software, right? And we use software for everything in our lives now. I mean, it's incredible. Like, there's not a single human being, I would say, that is not touched by some piece of software in their life, right? If it's something that they're using on their smartphone. Look at the big move in connected homes, right? People putting in Google devices or Amazon devices to be able to to work their lights and, to have workflows and automation in their homes. Why on earth can't we, talk to them about doing the same thing for their business, right? So, yeah, I live in a connected home, right? It's most of my friends do. People that I know in my business circles, are using software in their cars. Look at people that drive Teslas. I mean, that's basically a computerized battery on wheels, right? Like,
Yeah.
so we live in a more modern world.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And there's no reason, again, it doesn't have the administrative burden or the installation burden using cloud-based applications that we had in the past. So that should make it much easier. And like I
yes.
said, the savings are, it's where you start to really show them the value. And everything about flat rate billing is understanding the value for your customer, being able to explain it to them.
Yeah. And I put the customers to avoid. Let me get back to my banners here for a second. I'm actually going to put up comments and questions again, because I would love to hear from people that are tuned in today. What kinds of software is new in your life? Like what kinds of things you're using software for that you weren't using it before, right? So it is a new world that we live in. And again, for flat rate customers, they're looking for different ways to become more effective and efficient. And it's a great way in the sales process too to filter out ones that are not going to close down the road, right? So if you're getting that kind of pushback on either the software, the rules, or getting the data early on, then they're probably not a good candidate for the program. And I would argue that they're probably not a good candidate for managed print, right? And we all know those customers. They're typically the smaller, louder ones that take up a lot more of our bandwidth and cost us a lot more money to manage, because we probably shouldn't have closed them in the first place, right? So I would certainly say that this is not any different in the flat rate world. I don't think it's new. I just don't think it's any different.
Okay. Sorry. I have to tell a story that now you just triggered it. When I was working in California for a dealer out there, I was reviewing profitability of the contract on some customers. And I went to my owners and I said, here's the deal. One of two things is going to happen. We're either going to bump their contract rate by about 30%. And they said, well, they'll go away. They'll leave us. Well, I said, then I'm cutting the power cord. Because that was my two choices to be profitable.
I love it. Yeah. And it's no different here, right? So don't be afraid to say no. And that's, one of the things with these types of customers is it's okay to say no, right? And, Ken, in my, sales career, I've actually won deals because of saying no. That when I've filtered out potential, clients in the early stages of deals saying, you know what? This program really isn't for you. And that's okay. We've got a traditional cost per page program or some other thing. And then customer says, well, wait a minute. What do you mean it's not for me? Like, why isn't this for me? What are you saying about me? It's like, well, I'm not saying anything. Just from our conversation so far, it doesn't sound like it's the right thing. It could be a little too progressive, could be a little bit, too leading edge for you, and say, no, that's not us. So, at least be honest with that conversation and make sure that you're on a level playing field, because whenever you under promise and over deliver, as long as you're having the same conversation with the customer, and it's not a complete fight every step of the way when you're asking them to do something a little different, then you've got a much better opportunity to win that deal, right?
Absolutely.
You'll notice the next area that I have there for high variability, and I have listed education and accounting and finance, and I've put question marks there for a very good reason. And why is that, Ken? Why do you think I would have them there and then have question marks? What could possibly drive that?
Well, there are several things that could impact it. When I looked at the one about accountants, true, they have a peak during the year, but there are ways to manage it. With education, they're going to have ups and downs. And, a lot of times with schools, for example, they may only want to pay 8 or 9 months of the year. And
Right.
again, if you get creative, the odds are pretty good that you can find ways to make that work, especially if you have them on rules-based printing.
Right. And that's the magic I was looking for there, right? Is that data is the answer for everything. So even though their behavior might be variable throughout the year, I guarantee you that from year to year, it's not as variable, right? So as long as we have that data, and that's how I pay my gas bill, right? It's on an even billing schedule. So even though I live in Canada, so people know that we have pretty harsh winters, and actually the area that I live in, we also have pretty hot summers, right? So we have high variability in what those bills look like to just be able to keep it livable. But that's not how I pay. I'm on equal billing because the gas company knows and the electric company knows what my usage is over the year. So all they've done is taken the data and said, here's what you're going to pay us every month, right? So it's the same thing with education. It's the same thing with accounting and law firms. What other verticals might have high variability? Those are the two biggest ones that I can think of.
There's another possibility is churches. There are some
Sure.
they'll have peak seasons and maybe some off peak seasons.
Yeah. And maybe actually in another phase of the world that you also participate in, which is travel and tourism, right? That there are different peak seasons for, what they do as far as trying to get people to Cancun and other areas. But again, going back to the data, it really is as simple as making sure that we're going back to that first one, which is the data hoarders, and making sure that we have the right data. So willing to share it, then try and see what you can do. If they're not willing to, then, possibly don't, right? The last point I have on this in customers to avoid is if they're too small. And this is nothing new. This is managed print in general, right? That one of the problems we get into in trying to sell the value of a managed print program is there has to be some level of complexity. And if there's not that complexity, and then there's probably not a reason for them to do anything other than procure it the way that they do today. And there's lots of folks out there who will help you to set up an e-commerce platform for your dealership to be able to take care of those smaller ones, so that at least you're getting the dollars for those versus Amazon or somebody else. But certainly a flat rate program may not be the best, thing. Complexity is our friend. And one of the new complexities that's really been driven through this pandemic that we've all lived through is home users, right? So trying to facilitate print for people that are working out of remote offices. And that could be 30 or 40% of their people going forward. Who knows, right? So looking for those kind of complexities where to give them some kind of predictability, even though the way that their people are working has become less predictable, that's really important, right? And so flat rate's probably a good option for those people.
Yeah, I was going to say, especially when you think about the potential of bundling a flat rate printing program with something like a phone service. So like a cloud-based phone service or network support that is cloud-based, so that even though the client, okay, we've lost West. Hopefully he will be back in a minute. But
You lose me. I have the magic power, man. Sometimes I just pop in, sometimes I pop out. You're gonna lose me again.
Okay. Okay. I can't tell on my side of the conversation whether he's there or not. I thought, whoop, maybe he's gone. But you start to think about a package and creating services that support clients in their home office. I know some dealers that immediately started creating some working with their vendors to find devices that would work well in a home environment. They put together an opportunity for companies to acquire that and to do it in a way that was cost effective for the company, got their employees up and printing quickly. All of this just requires you thinking a little bit outside the box. But that kind of takes us to West's story about a purple cow.
Yeah, I love the purple cow story, right? And that really what we're trying to do here, the value we're trying to add, doesn't have to be life altering or changing to how you provide it as a business, but it does have to have enough impact and life changing meaning for the customer. And typically that's a very small thing, right? So the purple cow story, look it up. Seth Godin is the guy that came up with it. So I won't take everyone through the whole story today, but essentially, if you think of a purple cow, it's definitely noteworthy. It's definitely something you have to check out and figure out why it's purple, right? Is it purple right down to the skin? Did somebody paint it purple? Is it genetically modified? Like, it raises a lot of questions and a lot of attention because you don't see a purple cow every day. But it's still a cow. It still produces milk. It still lives in a field. It still does whatever a cow does, right? So under the flat rate program, that's what's really important here, is that what we're changing in the managed print spectrum isn't the whole model. We're not changing the whole managed print model, but we're changing those significant things for those customers that will have a huge impact on their everyday business lives, right? So can we talk about the rules-based platform, the importance of doing that assessment and putting those rules in place? Because even though that's just a small, kind of change in how they're managing their print, the direct result of it is huge, right? Like, it's massive. Doesn't mean they have to print on different equipment. Doesn't mean they have to do different things, but it makes a huge difference in the cost and the efficiency of what they're doing, right? So, yeah, I love that Purple Cow story, and I've been using it for years. So thanks to Seth Godin for creating that one. And if you get access to the 10-day challenge, you can actually see a drawing I did of a purple cow in my early days of managed print training, which I use quite often. So make sure you register and go look for that.
And we will have them on our website, selling them autographed copies at a reasonable rate.
Yes, if anyone wants them, and we can do purple cow T-shirts by special order. Hey, the next thing I want to move on to, Ken, is talk about devices to avoid, right? Because I think customers are one thing because they can really affect the efficiency of the program, whether you're going to make money in a flat rate program. But devices are another thing altogether. And I know from your extensive experience in the service world that really the types of devices are just as important as the types of customers, right?
Oh, it's huge, and we'll come back. I'll come back to your slide in just a second. But the first piece of it is right sizing the equipment, because anytime you put the wrong size piece of equipment in, and there's a video in the challenge where we walk through this and we look at the actual numbers. But a larger machine, the per page cost was 9 times as expensive as it was for a smaller machine in that same environment. And yet the majority of the machines that were in that environment, well, let me phrase that. The majority of the higher speed models were in the environment where a low speed model would have been more profitable. And so it's those kinds of things is part of how we drive on the service side efficiency in doing this.
Yeah, it's really important what you mentioned there is that it's not always the bigger device that's the right one, right? And that's one thing I've always done in my assessments is talk to customers about total cost per page or total cost of ownership for what they're putting in place, right? Because it's not enough to say, well, this device is only 0.3 of a cent for black and white, and that smaller device is actually 0.6 of a cent. It's like, yeah, that piece of equipment though on the cost side, whether you're buying it or leasing it, you've got to divide that cost out amongst the pages that are being produced, because just like the toner cartridge, just like the fuser and anything else is going into it, that's a part of the cost for that page. And customers are shocked when they discover it's like, oh yeah, I didn't really think of that. So like when I actually do that now, the total cost per page for that larger device is almost 0.9 of a cent per page, not the 0.3 I thought it was, right? So really important. And I know that one of the affiliates that we talked about earlier, BI Services, they do a really great job of showcasing some of those devices and what the actual service costs on that pieces of equipment are, et cetera, right? All right. Non-networked, and I'm a real stickler on this one. Like really today, like this day and age, like, bandwidth, everything is cheap, right? That there's no reason anymore for people to have a non-network device in their office. And if they do have one, then maybe that's one that we facilitate through an e-commerce transaction through our site or through a traditional, sort of offering, but certainly not for a flat rate program. And one of the reasons for that, like one of the big reasons is that in the contracts typically that I've worked on with dealers, we talk about this concept called benchmarks, right? Where we're benchmarking the volumes. They're no longer minimums, they're benchmarks. And we may have to come back to them with a 13th invoice at the end of the year or readjust their flat rate pricing if we don't have a good grasp on that volume on a regular basis, right? We need to know, especially initially when we're putting the contract in place, exactly how they're trending for those volumes. And local devices simply don't, allow us to do that, right? Yeah. And again, really today's day and age, local devices, I don't know.
I think it's interesting. We could talk about on the desktop next to my wife's computer, we have a 30 page a minute device, and it's networked. And so she prints to it from the network, not through a cable. We could run a cable, but it has built-in networking. So why not just put it straight on the network, and then you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, and the truth is, like anything in my life now, right? Even for my wife's store, that I got some wireless speakers to be able to set up for her, right? Because you remember in the old days, if you were trying to have sound anywhere in your home, you'd have to run out miles of cable. And I did that when I first moved out to the lake. I ran like a wire all the way out to my deck. I drilled holes in the floor, went down to the basement, ran cables, pushed them outside. And now, guess what? Those wires are gone, right? Like I would never use a wired speaker on my deck again. There's just no reason to. So again, not everyone's going to agree with that, right? There will be certain audiophiles that say, well, you're sacrificing sound quality and other things. But believe me, the people selling those wireless speakers, they're not concerned about them as customers, right? They're concerned about people that are a little more progressive and they want to have the ease of being able to do something versus the, the higher, quality, et cetera, right? And that's
Absolutely.
a good lesson for us in making sure that when we're profiling these flat rate customers, that we understand exactly what their buying needs are, right? Just like any other complex solution based sale, to understand what they're actually looking for. So back to the devices. The other one is ancient relics, kind of like you and me, Ken. That they're service intensive, right? That a lot of these older devices, that the more times that you have to touch them, the more parts you have to replace, then the natural thing there is it's going to be very difficult to get a high margin cost per page on those devices. And they can be unpredictable as well, especially if they're in a customer environment where you're taking over that existing equipment, right? And I'll be the first to say that there are some phenomenal devices, and I want to put an exclamation mark on this. There's lots of great old machines out there that are refurbished and rebuilt that would be excellent in a flat rate program. And you can get those through a lot of organizations. But the one thing that's common about all those devices is that they are only refurbishing and rebuilding the ones that they know are completely reliable, right? So they're not finding obscure, strange devices that nobody wants and refurbishing them and putting them back in the marketplace. That's not what they're doing, because they learned a long time ago the only way you make money on that equipment is if it works, right? So,
well, and if it has a low page cost on supplies too, because
correct.
People that are going to put out refurb remanufactured equipment aren't going to pick devices that have high page costs, because that defeats all of the purpose of what we're trying to accomplish. And so in this area, what we suggest and what we believe very strongly, the approach is that if a customer's got a bunch of we'll call them widows and orphans for equipment, you buy them and you get rid of them. And once you own the fleet, you can put in what works and what will standardize the customer experience, what is cost effective to operate. And the end result again is now you've driven up your profitability and reduced your training and your car stock investments.
Yes, in our 10-day challenge, we talk about that to quite a bit of degree. And we also have dealers who come in who do exactly that for their flat rate programs, where the first thing they do is they make it mandatory to buy out the fleet, right? Say, hey, look, if I'm going to take this over, yes, I can use that device, and that one. Those 6 I can't. I'm going to buy them all. And then for those 6 that I'm not going to use in the program, you can do whatever you want with. You can give it to us for recycling, or you can donate it to your church or your kid's school or whatever, right? That ownership of the fleet, taking that conversation away from, them having to make a decision about which things they're going to buy. All they're buying is flat rate, right? I love it. It's honestly, I would, say that if for those dealers out there that are looking to do it, that owning the fleet is one of the best things you can do under a flat rate program for sure.
Absolutely.
And you can speak to this one a little bit, Ken. What is MTBF?
Mean time between failure. And so again, as we're looking at devices we put in, part of it is right sizing the device, because that improves that. And we want to look at use data. And for those of you that are on BEI, how valuable the data is, so that you can start to go out and assess why am I not getting what I want? And then BEI, sorry about that, Wes, has a tool that is perfect for quoting flat rate, in that it'll help you pick the most cost-effective device in that volume band among all of the equipment you sell based on your data. And again, all of what we're trying to do is to make sure that as we replace equipment, we replace the printers that we bought that we don't want. We replace the existing MFPs that, for one reason or another, we're going to replace, that we put in the most cost-effective device overall that will have the lowest TCO based on the volume, because that's how we're going to make the most money.
Yeah, and a lot of it is. And again, under the flat rate program, everything is a cost. So make sure that we're getting as much margin out of the device that we're putting in that program as possible. The other thing is that we have to be careful of is no service experience on that equipment, right? And then I do have a note there, or service partners that can actually help with that. So I know, for example, Clover Imaging is one, and there's certainly others out there that they have a service network across the country, which does have expertise in certain areas, right? So if you can depend on whoever those people are in those different areas, etc. But if you have no service expertise and you can't get people, flat rate is not the place to learn how to service a device that you're not familiar with, right? So that could be under a traditional cost per page program. And again, there's nothing saying that when we're talking to a customer about flat rate, that if the device isn't right, or they as a customer, that we can't talk to them about cost per page again, right? That you've still got that expertise, you still have that that volume of things to be able to help the customer with, right? So never, ever, ever say yes to a device that you're not comfortable with, that you don't have some service expertise on, or your partners don't, right?
Yeah. And just to be honest, I wouldn't take a device I didn't have some expertise on a cost per page. I might do it time and material, but even if I was in a conventional straight down the street proposal, I'd be like, if you want us to service all of your equipment for you, that's got to go.
Yeah.
And the exception would be sometimes there are devices that have a unique function that nothing else will do. And then can I find somebody that I can sub that work out to, that will, if something does happen that I can't fix easily, I'll make sure that I know that. And then I got to build that cost factor into the contract. I'm more likely to put it on a time and material and say, listen, there'll be things I can help you with. There will be things that I can't.
Yeah, I used to do that with quite a few local devices as well, right? So if people are adamant that they wanted to keep those local devices in the fleet, we said, that's fine. We're just going to charge you every time we ship a cartridge out, right? Like it's not going to be under the cost per page program. One other customer situation that I ran into was a customer that actually had to have serially connected printers to their computers. And unfortunately, they don't make those anymore. So they had this ancient fleet of serially connected printers because of a security thing that existed within whatever they were doing. And there was no other application they could use. I'll never forget that one, right? Because it was like right away, it's like, man, I feel so bad for you. You have to be stuck with that. Because by the way, these aren't going to be cheap like for us to take care of these, right? But nonetheless. Yeah. So there you go, everyone. Hopefully we've given you a little food for thought on both the kinds of customers to avoid as well as devices to avoid. And I never like to leave things on a negative front, Ken. So let's talk about the 9-step process. This is something I love a lot.
This is our secret sauce. So pay attention. We're gonna share a secret.
It is, and it's something that you can do no matter what you're doing. So if it's flat rate or anything else, right? So in this 9-step process, where we start is assessing, and especially in our flat rate program, you've got to learn how to assess both your customer as well as your own business model, right? So to be able to look at what you are doing as a dealership and understand where you're at. And then make the choice of where to go, because Ken, as we know, many dealers that we've spoken with, flat rate simply is not an option for them as a dealer, even, right? Let alone for their customers, and that's okay. But we need to figure out, and you need to figure out where you're going to go. Then we identify the changes that have to be made to your offerings, to your programs. Maybe it's in the sales force or your accounting side, even service delivery. And then once we get there, we can start looking at creation of different elements, the documents that you'll be using with your clients, your comp plans for the sales reps, any policies that exist within your contracts, et cetera. Then we can move on to training. Only then can we start to market this new offering. And once we've marketed it, to implement it, and then of course adjust it, because Ken, as you know, any new program under the sun, any existing program has to be adjusted. We have to have the flexibility to do that. And what's that sitting at the top of the stairs there, Ken?
Well, somebody gets to the top, they're flat rate certified.
That's right. Provided they're working with us through the program, by the time you get to that point, it comes with flat rate certification. Now, flat rate certified is actually a logo that comes with flat rate certified through the Flat Rate Academy. And that's not saying that you have to work with us to train you and help you move through that 9-step process, as long as you do. And there are several dealers that we're working with to actually be able to test based on their flat rate programs, which they've developed on their own. So flat rate certified is available to you too. If you've got your own flat rate program and you're watching this either live or through one of the recorded sessions, to make sure that you get in touch with us to find out how you can go through that testing yourself to be able to use that, right? The website that we're creating for it actually will list the benefits for the end users. So it's a resource for you to send your end users to understand why they should be using flat rate certified versus those that possibly say they're doing flat rate and aren't. And Ken, we've seen that far too much over the years. The reason that we have this race to the bottom with cost per page is because there's no standard definition of what managed print is or what should be included, right? So
yeah,
let's try and avoid that as we move into flat rate. So whatever you do, get certified. And the next live stream, so pretty excited about the one we're doing next week, Ken, because as you know, for me on the sales side, I do love the sales elements of this. And we're going to be talking about, should I hire a flat rate specialist? Should I or shouldn't I? And I'm not going to give away all the details on that today, Ken, because I think people need to tune in for that next episode and find out. So remember, we're doing these every Wednesday from here on out at 11 a.m. predictably Eastern Standard Time every week. So we will be sending out an invite after this, probably through LinkedIn. And for those that have registered for the 10-day flat rate program, get you an email as well to remind you about it so you can book your calendars for next Wednesday at 11 a.m. And Ken, I can't thank you enough for going on this journey with me and and helping our customers. And go ahead.
Well, you said that I forget exactly what you said with the dependable, or what was the word you used when you described it? The
Reliable.
Reliably. Yeah. Well,
yes.
So just like flat rate billing provides your customers a reliable bill, you can reliably depend on this show being at 11 o'clock every Wednesday.
Yes. And either one or both of us, hosting it for you, right? So to everyone out there, keep selling, keep driving our channel forward. I think managed print, if we're willing to be progressive, can be as exciting a time right now as it ever has been. So until next time, Ken, thank you very much. And to all our viewers, thank you.
Thank you very much for being here. We'll see you next time.